Is the Matsu Valley about to implode because there is just so much demand for real estate out there that the whole market is about to just take off and explode? Or are we at the point where the entire market is about to collapse into a pile of rubble just because we're about to see so many properties coming onto the market and there's not going to be enough demand for it, which makes all the prices just collapse? We'll get into that in just a minute. My name is Jamin. I'm your first friend in Alaska. Luckily for you, I'm also a real estate broker in South Central Alaska. Today, we're going to be talking about the Matsu Valley and what's going on as far as the single-family property market, the raw land, and the multifamily. The Matsu Valley is one of the more interesting, kind of telling markets in the entire area because this is where most of the development is happening in all of Alaska, really. Like, you would not know, looking at the Matsu Valley, if you were living there, that there is in fact a decrease in population in the entire state because there's always people moving to the Matsu Valley, and within the region, like, there's a lot of movement to the Matsu Valley. I've had a lot of interviews talking with Mike Brown, the Matsu Borough Director, Manager, kind of talking about the future of the Matsu Valley, and definitely you want to go check out that podcast episode because it's a banger, let me tell you. Okay. All that being said, though, let's go and jump into today's market update, looking first at what's going on in the single-family asset class. Now, looking first at the single-family properties, we're seeing not much of a difference, really. So there's about 439 properties available last year, and this year is 432. So 3 more properties, big whoop-de-doo, not a whole lot of movement there. But let's look historically, though. Prior to COVID, we'd see anywhere from about 700 to about 750 properties available. So not seeing much of a change there as far as the inventory goes. And also we're seeing that the not much of an inventory shift there. And also it's almost half of what it was a couple of years ago. So we're a long ways off from recovering to being what we were prior to COVID. And that's probably not going to change anytime soon because keep in mind the inventory we have here, about 440 properties available. Only about 62 of those are new construction. And that's significant because in previous updates I've said, okay, well, maybe a lot of these are really real and true brick and mortar existing homes. Maybe they're just kind of spec homes that people, well, not even a spec home. Maybe this is just something a builder puts out there with pictures with a lot and just says, hey, this is what it will look like, and it doesn't actually exist. Well, it looks like there's only upwards of 62 of those of this entire 400 property makeup. So, yeah, it doesn't really look like new construction. New construction does make up a good portion of it, and that's going to continue moving forward, but it doesn't make up the meat of the bell curve right now. Most of these homes are actually available, and that's new if you are looking to purchase something. All right, let's talk about what's going on as far as the number of properties that are actually selling. So we see that this time last year, there was 160 properties that sold, and this year there are 157. So yeah, another whoop-de-doo. Do keep in mind, though, that even though the inventory was nearly double prior to COVID to what it is now, the number of properties that are actually being sold back then is actually about the same as what it is now. I think it was right around like 150, 160, somewhere in that area. So you see that the demand is still very high in relation to the inventory that we have available, which, actually real quick, which I will let you guess as to what's going to happen as far as the average sold price in the next slide. All right, if your bet is that the average sold price would go from about $413,000 to about $435,000, then you would be correct. And we're actually seeing about a 5.5% increase for the year-over-year average sold price for the Matsu Valley. And that's kind of in pace with what we've seen so far, like just in recent years. Now, during the COVID times, we're actually seeing like about 10% increase for the average sold price, just 3 years, just boom, boom, boom. Like, that is insane, and that's not something we'd want to see long-term for the Matsu Valley. So I'm glad to see it's kind of settled down a little bit, because past couple of years up to this point, we've seen about 4%, about 3.8%, and this year it's about 5.3%. So I am perfectly happy with that. That's a good, healthy appreciation so sellers can buy, and they're going to know that their asset is going up. And also, it's not going to be going up so quickly to where it's volatile, it's overinflated, and ends up collapsing just because it's non-sustainable. If we're sticking close to that 10 to 15% for like 5 years, I'd be pretty worried about that. That does start to do some pretty bad stuff to us down the road. But that was also during the time of inflation, so it doesn't necessarily equate to like an over-bloated market. That's kind of inflation just doing its thing. All right, well, I know you guys are probably done hearing about single-family property, so let's go and talk about raw land real quick. So in raw land, we're actually seeing that there is a almost exactly cut in half for the inventory compared to what we had prior to COVID. Because prior to COVID, we'd usually see about 1,000 to nearly 1,200 pieces of raw land available. Now it's about 515. And I mean, that's down even from the year before, where it was around like 600 pieces of raw land for sale. And keep in mind, this does go anywhere from just the little postage stamp lot all the way up to like 100 plus acres plot that's out there. So this really does run the gamut, but not a whole lot of people, not as many people are willing to part with the land that they have now as they were prior to COVID. Now, keep in mind, this also might be, hey, maybe just so many pieces of land have been sold that there's not too much more to sell. I'm not 100% convinced that's it, but I guess that's always a chance. Now let's talk about how many pieces of raw land are actually selling. Well, we see that this time last year there was about 67 that was selling, this year 72. Not a whole lot of change there. Now prior to COVID, actually we're seeing about the same. So about 61 properties selling, so being at 72 is actually about right. On a side note, you can definitely see why raw land can sit on the market for so much longer, because you've got 70 odd properties that sold. Meanwhile, there was like 600 or so that was on the market. So you can definitely see that there's demand for it. It's not at the same level as what it would be for a completed single family home. Next, for the average sold price, we went from about $86,000 for the year to date last year to about $102,000 this year. So that is about a 20% increase for the average sold price for raw land pieces of property here in the Matsu Valley. And I wouldn't necessarily say that the prices just shot up by that much. I think really what it is you probably had like some large piece of commercial property that sold that was like millions of dollars, and that is just skewing all the numbers here. It'd be a lot easier to kind of parse out what the implications are if we could see the median as opposed to the average sold price, but this just is what it is. We're going to finish up this market update talking about the multifamily market in just a bit. Before we do that though, I did just want to make sure that you were aware that I have a relocation guide for those of you considering moving to Alaska. If that's something you're thinking about, do feel free to register on my website. Link for that is in the description section down below. And go ahead and register there and put relocation guide so I know what to send you. So go ahead and do that. And I'd love to send that over to you. My compliments. And also, we do have a meetup group for people who've recently come up here. So if you're up here now or you're going to be coming here soon, do also make sure you go to the Facebook group. Again, link for that description section down below. And we would love to have you along on our adventures as we go explore Alaska. And make sure that you jump in and you join part of the group. But yeah, without further ado, let's talk about the multifamily market. Next, looking at the multifamily market, we see that this time last year there were 33 pieces of land available on the market, and now it's 44. Now, that is a pretty good little increase there proportionally, and also looking historically prior to COVID, we see about 55 to 65 properties available on the market. Man, all of these are like factors of 11 here. That's kind of weird. But yes, apparently multifamily properties come in units of 11 up here in Alaska. But anyways, we see that 45 is still pretty low as far as the inventory goes in the Matsu Valley. And that's also not taking into account that we've had so many more people moving here. And so it's really in a lot more demand. So I would expect to see the average sold price increasing and the number of properties and number of units being sold increasing as well. But let's take a look at the stats and see if I'm right. Okay, you're not going to believe me. I did not look ahead and see what this is, but we see that the number of units actually sold went from 3 this time last year to 13 this year. And if you ask me if that's actually above what we had prior to COVID, I would have to say yes, it definitely is. Normally, we're seeing anything from I think it's 7 to about 10. So being at 13 for the month of May, that's definitely up from what we saw prior to COVID, even with the inventory being lower than what it was then. Last but not least, let's talk about this average sold price. So the average sold price went from about $601,000 this time last year to about $611,000 this year. So seeing a little bit of an increase for the year over year. And the thing that really stands out to me is that's a high average sold price, okay? Because you see in other places that are also in high demand in Eagle River, where I would argue if you have a fourplex, same condition and everything in Eagle River versus the Matsu Valley, the one in Eagle River is probably going to have an average sold price, okay? It's probably going to have a much higher sold price just because of its proximity and rents and all that. What's standing out to me about the average sold price in the Matsu Valley, though, is it is higher than what Eagle River is and Anchorage, which tells me that these are probably larger pieces of multifamily properties that are being sold. So you're probably looking at real and true fourplexes, fiveplexes, 10plexes, larger properties that are selling, as opposed to a lot of duplexes that you might find in somewhere like Anchorage or Eagle River. So that's really what's standing out to me about that. If you have insights about the multifamily market in the Matsu Valley, feel free to chime in down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. All right, let me wrap all this up for you in a nice little package and put a bow on it. So if I'm a buyer and I'm looking at this market, I'm taking some heart because I know there's more options in the Matsu Valley and it's going to be a lot more affordable than what it's going to be in places like Anchorage or Eagle River. So that's all good. And also, inventory is a lot lower now than what it was a couple of years ago. And I'm not really expecting an easy, slam bam, we're done kind of a transaction. Now, don't get me wrong, some people live a charmed life lately, and I've seen that really happen. And if you're watching this, you know exactly who you are, okay? It's not normal to get the first offer that you make. It's not normal to get the first house that you make an offer on. That's not particularly the way that this normally goes, even in the Matsu Valley. And also that stuff is happening now, and there are more options in the Matsu Valley, which does mean that you as the buyer do have a little bit more control than you would somewhere like Anchorage or Eagle River. So that's all good. And also, you're not really seeing a slackening in the market. You're not seeing prices coming down or anything like that in the near future. Quite the opposite. So I would say if you can get a property in a good area on terms that work for you, I'd be pretty happy with that. I'm pretty confident in the long-term trajectory and development of the Matsu Valley. If I'm a seller in this market, it's a little bit more of a balanced market. Now, that's not to say that it's a buyer's market. I think it's still a seller's market, but it's closer to being balanced than you're going to find just about anywhere else, just because there are more options available out here in the Matsu Valley. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You might have to make sure the house shows in its best light, but the listings I've had recently in the valley, we can usually get it sold within a couple of days still, if we're being pretty realistic as far as the price and doing our job in the marketing and everything else. If I'm an investor, big thing, make sure your numbers actually do balance out before you do anything. And pet peeve of mine, if you're an investor, do make sure you're socking money away for when things break. I am getting tired of hearing from people who are tenants who say that something broke at their property that they're renting and the landlord couldn't take care of it because apparently they were just pocketing all the net from the entire property and didn't bother putting any of it away for a rainy day. So make sure you take care of your property so you can take care of your tenants. Okay, off my soapbox. Everyone else, thank you for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm done.